Everybody loves rankings. Everybody loves lists. Who's the top four? Who's the first two out? College football playoff rankings is here. And we're going to discuss who our top four is. Who's our first two out? Should there be 8 teams? 12 maybe? Or is 4 enough? Does the teams being left out, does it justify an expansion? Find out our opinions today on episode 2 of Montana Boys Talk Sports. All right, Clemson, welcome back. How you doing tonight, man?
Doing well. How about you, brother?
I'm doing good. I think we got a really good topic tonight. This is something that a lot of people argue this one. A lot of people have very, very different viewpoints on things. College football. Do I have to say any more? College football, man.
It is one of the greatest debates in all sports. You determining who is the best teams to put into a playoff. There's no right answer.
Right.
There's a lot of wrong answers potentially, but there's no right answer. And I promise you, no matter what you say, someone is going to tell you that you're wrong.
Oh, absolutely. And it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what part of the country you're in, what fan base you're talking to. Someone is going to argue with you no matter what your opinion is, which is fine. That's fine. That's why we have the right to our own opinion. You know, it's a great thing.
Absolutely. And tonight we're going to have the college football playoff committee is going to be revealing their results and what they believe is the top 4 teams and those 2 teams left out.
Yep.
And I'm curious to see it. I'm curious to see because if we learned anything last couple of years is that sometimes those AP poll rankings, sometimes those coaches rankings, they don't actually reflect what the committee is going to come up with. Right. And it's not over yet, right? There's still weeks of football to be played. Yes. There's still championship games to be played. There are teams that are in the top 4 that are still going to be playing each other.
Oh, absolutely.
And that's likely going to influence how this ends. But it's the intrigue, right? It's the intrigue of knowing where they stand now, even though the reality is, does where they stand now really mean anything at all?
Right.
I would argue probably not, to be completely honest. It might be a mind game, but it really doesn't affect anything. But here we are. We're still doing it. We're talking it.
Right. And, you know, and when these rankings come out, you know, these are professionals that are ranking these teams based off statistics and you know, major wins and ugly losses. And, you know, and they're taking into account a lot of different aspects. But it seems to me every time these rankings come out, my views are way different than theirs. And I know me and you have talked, your views are way different than theirs. And sometimes mine and your views are way different than each other's. So where's the variable here? What's causing all of this variance in people's opinions on these teams? Because first of all, there's a lot of teams. There's a lot of teams. In college basketball, they're set up a very different way. They have a full tournament that goes on in March. We all know it, March Madness. All these teams play all these different games. And it's almost like a season within itself. College football is very different. They play a season, 4 teams get in, they get to play for it. It's such a different setup that I think it frustrates a lot of people because you see a lot of the same teams getting in kind of based off of history, based off of recent history. You even see it at the beginning of seasons. You know, I mean, prime example is a team like Clemson. Look at Clemson at the beginning of the year. If I'm not mistaken, I think they were a top 10 ranked team coming into the season. Well, we saw that they are not a top 10 team. They've had some pretty bad losses.
Yep.
I believe, don't quote me, but I believe they lost 3 games in a row for the first time in I don't even know how many years. It was bad.
Oh, yeah.
And that just shows you the recency bias there is of, well, they've been good every year for the past 6 or 7 years. That doesn't mean they're good this year. They've lost a lot of talent.
Yep. And that's the nature of college football, right? Is that there's always a turnover. No one ever plays for more than 4 years. Many of these guys only play for 3 years. One of them could be redshirted, but
Yeah.
they only have 3 years of eligibility in order to go to the NFL if they're that top talented. And most of these top tier teams are because they have those talented players. But then it also makes it intriguing. Like today, we are going to be talking about teams that are the 3 year players that are going to leave to college or in the NFL next year. And then we have a team that is full of 4 year starters that is now at the precipice of trying to get into the playoff as an undefeated team from a lower conference based on the fact that they have grown from within this talented pool of players. So I'm excited to hear what both of us did for our rankings. We didn't talk about it beforehand, so we don't know what each other's rankings look like. So that way we can reveal them to the world right here in front of everybody. But with that said, I know for me, it was interesting. Like I spent a lot of time debating how I was going to rank these teams and which one comes first. Who's going to be my number 1? Who's going to be my number 2, all the way down to my number 6. And as such, let's swing it back around and go the other way because we always like to reveal it the opposite way. For me, I had my 5 and 6, the 2 teams, those first 2 being left out. I said Alabama and Oregon. Oregon being 6, Alabama being 5. Okay. And I know that's going to be a bit of a shock to a lot of people because Alabama is the perennial, they're the playoff team. They're the one that's going to be in. And reality is this: if Alabama can run the table and win the SEC championship over Georgia at the end of the year, I have no doubt, there's no argument that they're going to be in the playoff. Right. But at the current time, they have a loss, and they had a loss to a Texas A&M team that really they're not bad, but they're not good either. They're just kind of riding the middle of the pine. So not a great loss. And that left them out. Oregon was the same kind of position, 1-loss team, not a good loss for Stanford. So to me, they have played really well. They have a huge win because they beat Ohio State. They beat a good UCLA team when UCLA was still undefeated. So that to me, they're right outside, but they are outside. Now we jump into the top 4. 4th place for me, Oklahoma. They're an undefeated team. They have not proven themselves yet when it comes to high-level competition, but at the same point in time, they have not lost. And I'm really big on that one. That's just a personal thing for me. You're going to see that in my rankings, that I'm really big on what does record say. Now, when you get in between, here's a group of teams at the same record, then yes, it comes to who beat who lost to who, and stuff like that. But I really think that a lot of value needs to be put in being undefeated. That means something. It should mean something, especially this far into the season. That said, my number 3 team, Michigan State. And they actually jumped a long ways for me this week. I actually had them down in about 7th to 8th spot last week, and I'm putting them all the way up to 3. And the biggest reason why, not only are they undefeated, but they beat Michigan this week. And that is a huge win. A top 4 team that was undefeated, they beat and moved up over top of them. So they're my number 3 team. Next up, I have number 2 is Cincinnati. Cincinnati, I believe, maintained their spot because they won again this week. They have that huge Notre Dame win. Really, the only thing you can knock them for is that Navy win, in which was a close game. But I think you have to well, and you have to always remember when it comes to Navy plays such a different style of football than anyone in the country because they play that triple option game, and it's just hard to play against. So anyone who beats Navy, even though Navy's only got, I think, 1 win all season, they're a tough team. They're always a tough out because they slow the game down so much too. I mean, Cincinnati's a pretty big run and gun team, and you don't run and gun with Navy because, well, Navy will take the ball and run down the field and waste 10 minutes of the clock.
Oh yeah, they'll burn 8 to 10 minutes every drive. And
exactly.
Low scoring games, ground and pound, like it's a different style of football they play.
And so true, and that's exactly it. I still have Cincinnati as number 2. My number 1, it's not going to be a shocker here. Georgia, undefeated. They've beaten Kentucky. They've beaten Auburn. They've beaten Clemson. Some pretty quality wins. I know Clemson's not doing as great, but at the beginning of the season when they beat them, they were still a ranked team. They
Right.
went on to beat Kentucky. They went on to beat Auburn. They play the SEC schedule. That's obviously a bonus. They beat Florida today, who's kind of fallen off, but they're a great team. It's gonna be tough for them. But and they still have to play Alabama most likely in the SEC championship, so that's gonna be a tough game. But yeah, that's my yeah, exactly. But that's my rankings, man. I'm pretty happy with them. I think that I have them pretty well on. I know that's not gonna be how they come out tonight in the playoff spots, but how about you, man? Where you got them?
Well, I was really tossed up on the first two out, or the first two out. Sorry, I've got three teams that I've got a really tough decision on, but I think I'm gonna say number 6. I'm gonna go Ohio State. I think Ohio State is a good team. They're good. We've seen them win some pretty good games this year. They have lost, but they have won some really tough games as well. And I see them as my number 6 right now. The team that I couldn't decide between with them, little bonus team here, was Oklahoma. Oklahoma and Ohio State, I couldn't decide who to put 6 because, like you said, Oklahoma is undefeated, but Oklahoma hasn't really played anyone yet. And I'm just not impressed with the schedule. I'm not impressed. I had to pick Ohio State over them at number 6. So number 5, I went Oregon. I think Oregon is a really good team. They do have the loss, but they did beat Ohio State. So I did have to put them above Ohio State, but I don't think they're in the top 4 yet for me. Now, at 4, I'm going to go Alabama. I'm going Alabama because they do have the one loss. But again, like you said, they play an SEC schedule. They play very tough teams every week. And most weeks they're winning by pretty good margins. They had the one slip up. So I think they deserve a number 4 spot. And I think we're going to end up seeing them win out and play Georgia in the SEC. And I don't know if they're going to beat Georgia, which if they don't, I don't think they should be in the playoff.
Completely.
But at this moment in time, we're not talking then. At this moment in time, I do think they are the number 4 team in the country.
It's fair.
Number 3, I'm going to agree with you on number 3. I'm going to say Michigan State. Especially after today's win against Michigan. I think Michigan State is a lot better than we thought they were at the beginning of the season. At the beginning of the season, I think there was a lot of hype around Michigan because of Jim Harbaugh being on the hot seat. It's time for him to do something. He's got to win. He's got to win. And they keep saying this, but Michigan is a good team, and they've been good every year that he's been there. I think there was one year that they weren't great, but other than that, they've been a really good team every year, just not good enough to get to the playoff. There's only 4 spots. There's only 4, which will be discussed later. But I mean, that's hard. It's hard to do. So Michigan State, I think, is a lot better than people thought they were. And I think they proved it today, beating Michigan. That was a tough game. They're now 8-0. Yeah, 8-0. Yep. And that's, like you said earlier, that's hard to do. To go 8 games in a row without losing is not an easy thing. Not every team is Alabama. Alabama seems to do it every year, and it's not this year, but not every team is built like that, and they can't recruit like that, and they can't do the things that Alabama can do because of the history of Alabama and the coaching staff and blah, blah, blah. Michigan State at number 3. Number 2, Cincinnati. Now, this was tough because I wanted to put them number 1. Cincinnati, I think, is great. I think Cincinnati has been on the rise for a lot of years now, and they're finally there. I think they're going to win this season out, and I think they deserve a spot, and it's going to be a shame if they don't get a spot and they win Um, and honestly, I don't even know what more to say about them because they've looked good all year. They had the one close game. Other than that, they have been great, and they deserve it. They deserve the spot. They deserve the number 2 in the country, and quite honestly, they're the most impressive team I've seen all year. Number 1, again, I'm going to agree with you on that one. So our top 3 looks the same. I'm going Georgia number 1. Georgia is Georgia's really good. They are very, very, very good. And I think Georgia is going to be the team to finally knock Alabama out of it because I think, like I said earlier, I think we're going to see Alabama win out. We're going to see Georgia win out. They're going to meet in the SEC championship. And I think this is the year that Georgia finally pulls it off and wins that SEC championship and moves on to the playoff.
A bold prediction there. Bold prediction indeed. Yeah, we see. I think we see the top 3 the same way. Really, our difference comes in with Oklahoma is really our biggest difference because we ranked the rest of them in the same order. I just had Oklahoma sitting above that line where you have them falling outside. So
right.
Not overly surprised by that. I think that's going to be very different than what we see tonight when the playoffs come out. I definitely think that you're going to see Alabama. I think you're going to probably wind up seeing Ohio State in there. I think we both stay on the same side of being that Oregon should be ahead of Ohio State because of the head-to-head. But I also know that's not how the playoff committee. Well, that's not how the AP rankings looks at it. We don't know how the playoff committee looks at it yet, but it will be interesting to see. And I think that kickstarts us right in to what our next point really is. And that is the matter of, is 4 teams enough? Because as we just talked about, there is a lot of contention between those top 4 teams and who is the 5, who is the 6, who is the 7, who's the 8, and it keeps on going on. And one thing we see every year, and I have a feeling we're going to see it again this year, is the issue of a team like Cincinnati, undefeated, right now ranked number 2. Will they stay in there? Will they stay in the top 2 once we get to the point that we make it to the conference championship game? And they don't win a conference championship game that is considered equal in value to that of the Alabamas and of the Oklahomas and the Ohio States and the Georgias. Will they still have their spot where they belong?
Yeah, I think what people struggle with the most is that there's only 4 spots. And like you're saying, I mean, there's these teams that they're sitting there in the first 2 out, and even another team or 2 that honestly I think are good enough to get in there and play for a spot to go to the national championship. So it's a very weird to me, it's just weird to have only 4 teams. I just don't understand the concept of it.
I completely agree. It's one of those things that is extremely challenging about the current system is only 4 teams are allowed. Teams are getting left out that no doubt would have a huge argument to being one of the best teams in the country. And they don't even get a chance to because we limit it to only these 4 teams. Whereas if we could make a playoff where it was 6 teams or 8 teams or even up to like 12 or 16 teams, we could really see who is the absolute best team in the country. And until we do that, we're never going to know. It's always going to be a speculation. And for those because you hear it every year, the big argument is always that these teams like Cincinnati are undeserving of being in the championship because they just don't play a tough enough schedule, ... But then it's like, if anyone watches them play in the bowl games each year, almost every year, it is one of these parent teams that are not good enough to be in it that wind up winning their bowl game against a top tier school. And honestly, that's all you need to know that they deserve to be there. They deserve to get their chance and try to be one of those teams. And until they get that opportunity, we will never know. But I mean, I'm we watch it every year. We watch the NCAA tournament, and in the NCAA tournament every year there's a big upset, and those big upsets are what make it so great. If the Alabamas of the world really are the best teams, they'll beat them. They will come out on top and they will win. And if they're not, they'll get upset. And that's the way the system is meant to be. That is it's unfortunate to me that currently we limit it so much to only these 4 teams that are never. And it would be one thing if it was like an argument where none of the other teams were even legitimate contenders to go against them. But we know that's not the case. We know that there are so many other schools that are valid contenders, and really they could make a great case in the playoff.
Right. And so, I mean, it seems to me like we're kind of on the same page as far as 4 teams is not enough.
Right.
So what is enough? Is it 8? Is it 12? Is it 24? Do you open it up like you do in college basketball and have a whole nother season and a big tournament? Like what is enough?
Well, and that is a huge question, right? And it's a hard question to truly answer the appropriate way. And I know me and you have talked before, and me and you don't exactly agree on what the right number is. But right. I would say you can't go too big. Unlike college basketball, college football can't play in 2 days again. It takes time to recoup. Football is a physical sport, and it takes a toll on the body, and that's got to be taken into account. I personally am a huge argument for 8 teams, and that'll be my first take on this. Is solely that is 8 teams. Very simple. There are 5 power conferences in the league. All 5 of those conferences deserve a playoff team. If you win your conference, I don't care if it takes 2 or 3 losses, you've earned the right to be in the playoff because you are a Power 5 conference champion. I also believe that one non-Power 5 conference champion should always be in there. Whether it's the Cincinnati's or the UCFs of the world or the Boise States back when Boise State was one of them, if you can win your conference tournament and you are the top ranked team from a non-Power 5 conference that won their tournament or their conference championship, you deserve in. Well, that gives you 6 teams. You have 2 more spots remaining after that. And I think those 2 are at large. There's your chance to let that extra Alabama or that extra SEC school in, that extra Big 12 or the Big 10, whoever the top conference is, they get that spot in there. You're still not going to be perfect. You're still going to have arguments. But I don't think anyone could make a valid argument in a situation where the conference champions are guaranteed a spot in. The argument would be on who are the other 2. But 6 people would earn their way into the playoff. Right.
Now, I mean, I can't disagree with you because I'm big on the conference championships. I think every conference in Division I. So how many conferences are there in college football? There's 10 conferences. There's 10 conferences, 130 schools. Okay. Now, the way I see it is, like I said, I'm big on conference champions. I think all 10 conference champions should get a guaranteed spot. You play it no different than the NFL or the NBA or, the way it works is if you win your conference or your division or, whatever it is, you get an automatic bid. Now, I think there should be, like you said, 2 at-large teams after that. That, again, is where you would throw in like a Georgia or an Alabama, whoever lost that SEC champion. Who is the top 2 teams that lost a Power 5 conference championship? Those are the 2 top teams, or those are the 2 at-large teams that I think should get those last 2 spots.
It's hard to argue that, right? Like, I would challenge the fact that I don't believe there are 5 competitive conference champions out of those 5 non-Power 5 conference conferences, and that's where I think the argument would come in.
Yes.
Valid argument to say that they deserve to be there. I don't disagree with that as a personal belief in the value of being a champion. I could understand the argument though of saying that if the Mountain West team wins and they're not even ranked in the top 50 of the country, is it worth having them in a playoff game? They would have earned their right 100% based off the theory that you bring up. But at the same time, is it going to be a good competitive game? Now, with that said, they would probably wind up playing against the number 1 and number 2 team, in which they're probably going to get destroyed. They have a chance, though. They have a chance.
But how many times have we seen the top 4 teams go in and a team like Alabama just destroy the team that they play?
Oh, it almost every year. Unfortunately, that has been like the one negative to the college football playoff argument so far at the 4 teams is that there just haven't been nearly as many competitive tournament games as you would imagine, for the fact that these are apparently the 4 best schools in the country at equal levels.
Right. And like I remember very clearly, I remember one year, Michigan State and Alabama. And Alabama just walked all over them. And it was like, this game isn't even fun to watch. So in that case, because I get where you're coming from. Those bottom 5 conferences typically aren't going to put out a very competitive team. Now you do have some of them, like Cincinnati, for example. They're going to be good. They're going to play really well. Boise State, several years back, they were a very, very good team. They were playing top 25 teams almost every week and winning. So you're going to have some teams that are actually very competitive. But how often do you see in like March Madness where a team that nobody's even heard of gets into the tournament? Everyone's, they have no chance of winning their first round game, and then they win it.
Absolutely.
They have no chance of winning their second round game, and they win it. They have no chance of winning in the Sweet 16, and guess what? They win. And they move on to the Elite 8. Some of them make it to the Final 4. Heck, we've even seen some of them go to the championship. And it's like, that is where these schools and these teams get an opportunity to kind of showcase themselves, to show we are worthy of being here. You just haven't given us a chance yet.
I think you have a very good point. And I think to follow up that point in a valid way is to say that's how you develop the game as well. Is like we said at the beginning of this entire episode, was that you have schools like Cincinnati, a school of 4-year starters that take time to develop to that level. And Cincinnati was at that level last year. They were a top 10 team at the end of the year. They went on to a bowl game last year on a New Year's 6 game.
Yep.
And they did really well. And a team like that is not going to lose all their starters. They're going to bring them back. And
exactly. And you're seeing the results of that. You
are
number 2.
And I think even stronger yet is the case that when you let them into those playoffs, is it allows your school to recruit better. To your point on the college basketball front, Chicago Loyola, Wichita. Wichita is now a perennial team that gets into the playoffs every year and makes a run. And we don't even look at them as a small school anymore. They were a small school, 5-6 years ago? They barely snuck into the playoff, and they end up going on this big March Madness run. And now they recruit every single year, and they bring in new players, and they're in the battle every year as a ranked team. And it has been extremely impressive to watch them over all of this time continue to be such a strong team. And a lot of that is attributed to the fact that they had they made the run. They were allowed to get in the playoff because they won their conference tournament and they made it in. And now they're making it in on the merits of being a top 25 school without even going to the playoff. They're already in the. So I do understand your point there. And you have a very valid point. And I'd be curious to know if more teams, your Coastal Carolinas of the world that are right now ranked at number 21 in the country, if these teams had an actual chance at being in the playoff, if they knew that if they won the conference championship, they're going to the playoffs, would you then all of a sudden get kids that would want to be taking advantage of this transfer portal to go to those schools and play? Because I could be on Alabama as a backup, and there's a chance you could still make the NFL. If you don't believe it, go ask the Derrick Henry's backup running back when he was in college, who was also in the NFL. Like, there's a lot of really good examples. Felix Jones, who was a Cowboy for a long time, was a backup his entire time in college. Like, this happens quite frequently where they do that. But on the flip side of it, you could potentially transfer out and go in, or just choose to go to a non-Power 5 conference team and know if you can build a good enough team, guess what? You're going to go in the playoff. There might be a higher chance of you making it into the college playoff, which is all eyes on you and your team, if you were at the Cincinnati's of the world instead of being at the Wisconsins of the world, where you are now going to have to fight against Michigan, Michigan State, Ohio State for one guaranteed spot, and maybe if you're lucky, 1 second spot. And you have the entire gambit. Whereas at other conference, yes, only one team's going to make it. But if we can make a power team inside of a non-Power 5 conference, we see what the Cincinnati's, the UCFs, and the Boise States of the world have done.
Right.
So, to your argument, I think I just argued in favor of your 12 over my own 8. But I 100% agree with you, though, that giving opportunities to schools to make it into the playoff can only help the game in the growth of trying to develop those non-Power 5 schools, which I think is why it doesn't happen too, is because I don't think the Power 5 schools want that to happen.
Yes, I agree with you entirely on that, because that is exactly their biggest fear, is some small school coming in and taking some of their praise and glory. And I really think that's what it is. That's why there's so much pressure to keep it at 4, because then we can guarantee our 4 teams get in. And it's like but I feel like a lot of the fans watching are tired of it. They're tired of seeing the same 4 teams. They're tired of seeing a 2-loss team being argued to try to get in there because of their name and who they are. It's like, no, I want to see those undefeated teams. Why is there 3 or 4 undefeated teams being left out? You know, why? Another thing that I, going off the transfer portal, guys can pretty much move freely now in college football.
It's crazy, right?
Pretty much whenever they want, which is unreal. It's unheard of. This is a brand new thing. And it to me, expanding it is going to do exactly what you said. You're going to see some guys leaving these big schools where they got recruited and play backup. They're going to go to those teams like Coastal Carolina or I can't even think off the top of my head, but these small schools, North Texas, small schools where, hey, they've got something going there. If I can go there and play my next 2 seasons there, we could recruit better players. We could also bring in more transfers. You know, say you get a transfer quarterback from an Auburn, and you get a transfer receiver from a USC, and you get a transfer defensive tackle from Florida or a Miami, and these guys come to the same team. Now all of a sudden you've got Power 5 talent playing in a conference that no one's even heard of. And this team is making a run to the playoff. Now they get into the playoff. They win their first game. Say they knock off an Alabama or a Georgia or a Michigan. All of a sudden, you're looking at this North Texas team that could be playing Oklahoma to go to the championship.
Yep.
And to me, you look at the NFL this year. The NFL is pretty even. There's really not a standout team. There's the teams that are better. There's the teams that are worse, but everything is pretty evened out. And I feel like if you expanded the playoff, you're going to see a lot more evening out of college football. You're going to see some really good competitive games. You're going to see
which is so needed, right? Like I love watching college football, but I will say that my desire to watch college football compared to the NFL, which used to be equal, is no longer quite as equal. And a big part of that is because I already know how the outcome is going to be in half
Yeah.
the games because they're just not competitive.
Right.
And
I don't
that's
need to watch
unfortunate.
Alabama.
Yep.
I don't need to watch them play. I know they're going to win. I don't need to watch Georgia this year. I already know they're going to win. I would rather watch Michigan State, Michigan. I don't know who's going to win that one.
So true.
I would rather watch Coastal Carolina versus Louisiana Tech because I don't know who's going to win that game. It's going to be a competitive game.
No, and that is so true. And I'm going to bring this thing home by saying that although I agree with you on your points that you're making, they're very valid and they're very good. My final argument would wind up being the reason why I don't believe in 12 teams is because I like making a balanced bracket. I like having it balanced and into it because at the end of the day, if you wind up doing 12, that means 4 teams are going to get buys. And now you add a whole nother environment of who gets the buys and who gets this and who gets that. And 8 teams, it's very clean. 1 through 8. Whoever the top are. And there's no buys. Who cares where you get ranked? If you're the best team, you're the best team and you're going to win your game and you're going to move on. I do believe in the 8 teams. I still believe that as much as I would love to see the growth of the game in a way that you're talking, I think 8 teams is the value. And my last thought that I would want to take away from this conversation is to think about, do we think that the era of the bowl games is coming to an end? Because that's what we're almost doing here, right? The more you expand the playoff, the less you have of the bowl games. And my argument on that would be simply this, is that although I understand bowl games and I understand the whole participation trophy concept of what we got going on with the bowl games is it's pretty much what's happening. As long as you have a non-losing record, you get into a bowl game at this point. My problem with that theory and that system is that you have non-competitive games, you have lack of viewership. It seems to be more about the sponsorship than the viewership idea, which is why we watch the game. Making money, exactly. And I instead would rather watch a group of good teams play multiple games and expand how many of those teams that get in the chance, but they're playing for something. They're playing for something tangible. And another key point, I think if there's a playoff in the line, a lot more players are going to actually play rather than bailing out because of the fact that they're going to be going into the NFL. People want to win a title. Winning a championship means something. Winning a random Citrus Bowl, no offense to the Citrus Bowl, just doesn't have the same meaning. Or winning the Outback Bowl or the Gator Bowl.
Yep.
It means a lot to the players that want to play in the game. And they deserve that. But it means nothing to the guys that are wanting to just go make money in the NFL. Whereas I think if you put a championship, like you can win a national championship, you could raise your stock going into the NFL draft. That's enough to play for.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't know. On my end, I really believe in the 12 teams. I think you could make it work. As far as the buys, I think what you could do is you could have 6 teams on each side. You have 3 games on each side. You have 3 losers. See, I don't know how you would work that out. I'd have to draw it up because I can't picture it in my head at the moment.
The only way you wind up making it work is you wind up having to do 4 buys, 8 teams play, and you tier it down. And they do that in and a good example of how they do that is the conference championship tournaments in college basketball, because they tier their teams out. Sometimes they tier them out like 4 or 5 games in a row. It's really weird. But that would be the only model that works. You like 1 would get a bye, 2 would get a bye, 3 and 4 would get a bye, and then you wind up having like 12 and 5 play each other to go in, and
6 and 11, and okay. Yeah, I mean, that would be something you'd have to consider, and you'd have to try to make that work. But I'm so big on the conference championships. You know, if you can win a conference championship, I feel like you've earned your way. You deserve a chance to at least prove yourself in that tournament and or a playoff. And it just, I don't know. I feel like the 12 teams. See, now I'm contradicting myself. Maybe 8 is better. I don't know. I'm going to stick with 12. I'm going to argue it. I think it's the way it should be. I think conference champions should get a spot, and there's 10 of them. That means we need at least 10 spots.
Yeah, it's an interesting thought. I would love to hear a weigh-in from our audience on what they think. Should it be 8? Should it be 12? And one thing to think of, and this is like a big factor in my mind too, of whether you would go to 12 teams, is we are talking with the impression that they are going to care about conference championships.
Right.
We don't know if that's going to be the case or not. What happens if they go to 12 teams and it's still just the top 12 teams in the rankings? And if you did that, yeah. You lost me. I have no interest in the top 12 teams and not caring about conference championships. You kind of lost me. I'm going to be honest, you did. Because then it's going back to just being whatever this figurative ranking system is, which we already saw today that we rank our teams differently. And that just doesn't interest me as much. That loses the luster of why you play all season long.
Right.
If at different levels. So with that,
though, basing off speculation, it's not the right way to do it. You can't just speculate that a team, well, like the Oregon, Ohio State, for example. Why is Ohio State ahead of Oregon? Oregon beat Ohio State.
And there should be value in that.
Right.
It mind boggles me. Like, I get Ohio State's not the same team they were back when they lost to Oregon. Oregon might not be the same team as they were. But when did we decide that we decide to value eyeball over what happens on the field?
Right.
Speculation comes into play because we don't know what the teams look like compared to each other. We don't know if Georgia or Cincinnati would win a head-to-head game because we haven't seen them play a head-to-head game. We don't know if Michigan State or Alabama wins the game because we haven't seen them play the game.
Yeah, I mean, based off our argument, I mean, going back to the question we asked at the very beginning, the teams that are being left out, does it justify an expansion? You know, what's your thought there? Just a simple yes, no. I gotta say, yeah, I do.
Yes, but it must include conference champions.
Yes. Yes. There's gotta be that defining, yes, it deserves an expansion of conference champions.
Oregon should not be left out if they win the Pac-12. Cincinnati should not be left out if they win the Atlantic. Michigan State should not be left out if they win the Big Ten. Oklahoma should not be left out if they win the Big 12. Right. Georgia or Alabama should not be left out if they win the SEC. You win the championship.
But if Alabama or Georgia does not win that championship, that should not get them a spot in guaranteed.
I agree. If they in the theoretical of 8 teams or 12 teams where there's 2 at-large bids, if they fall into place as being the top-ranked non-conference champion, then you earn your way in.
Right, but if not, then they shouldn't get in based off of past performance.
And I think you're going to see that this year. Unfortunately, my gut tells me Alabama's going to wind up winning the conference championship game. Georgia's going to be undefeated going into that game. That's going to mean 2 spots to SEC, Alabama and Georgia. Automatically, just by that alone, you've just cut out multiple, at least 2, if not 3 of your conference champions from the Big 5, the Power 5 are going to be left out. You can't have Michigan State, Michigan, and Ohio State all in the playoff. And the funny thing is no one's trying to make an argument for 2 of those teams. They're only trying to make an argument for the 2 SEC teams. Right.
And it blows my mind how I don't know. The SEC, yes, I agree. The SEC is the toughest conference in college football. I will agree with that.
I would make an argument, though. I would make an argument on that point, though, too, as well, is that you say that, how many SEC schools are in the top 10 right now and that didn't lose this week? Top 10 includes 2. You have Georgia and you have Alabama. That's your 2. Last time I checked, the Big Ten has 3, and they have knocking on the doorstep Penn State. Yes, the SEC also has Ole Miss and Kentucky knocking on the doorstep as well. But when it comes to those top 10 schools, Ohio State, Michigan, and Michigan State, all 3 top 10 schools, all 3 doing well this year. Their losses, one of Michigan's loss was to Michigan State, and Ohio State's loss is to Oregon, who is also a top 10 team.
Right.
And now, if they were to win all the rest of their games and all their losses come from now that they have to play each other, they each have to play each other, then how do you justify that being less than Alabama losing to a non-top 25 school? How do you justify that against, at this point, in Oregon, who lost to a top 25 school? Georgia and Alabama are going to be playing, and one of them is going to lose. Either Alabama's going to be a 2-loss team, or Georgia's going to have a loss to another not top 5 school. Why is Alabama or Georgia losing to Alabama any different than Ohio State losing to Michigan or Michigan State, or Michigan losing to Michigan State or Ohio State? It should all be the same. They're all the top 5s.
Right. And honestly, I guess when I said that, I didn't word it right. I think the SEC is top heavy. Because I mean, your bottom end SEC teams are not that great of teams. They really aren't. You look at the Big Ten, it's very even. You have Ohio State, Michigan, Michigan State, you have Iowa, you have Penn State, you have Iowa State, you have Minnesota is a good team. Most years, Minnesota is right there knocking on the top 25. They're a top 30 team. And you're talking 6-7 teams that are all right there. SEC, you're talking 3 or 4 maybe. The bottom end teams are not that great of teams. And a lot of it is because it is so top heavy that the competition has kind of dwindled out of the SEC, because those top teams are so good that the rest of the conference can't compete. Who's going to want to go play in the SEC if they're not playing for LSU or Alabama or Georgia? Even Auburn has been slowly declining every year. Right now they're playing pretty good, but you look at, since Cam Newton was there and they won a national championship, they have kind of just slowly degraded.
And I would this is another conversation for another episode down the road. But one thing that I would love to see is, I would love to see college football adopt what college basketball does with the conference versus conference matchups, where in the early season, I'd love to see each year switch conferences each year as a different conferences that play each other. Let's see the Big Ten go head to head against the SEC. Take last year's number 1, number 2 down the line, the best from each of their conferences, which the bowl games are meant to do some of that, but it doesn't work the best.
Right.
Put them up against each other, and let's have a Big Ten versus SEC showdown. Let's see which conference actually is outplaying the other one each year, because the SEC is considered the premier group only because of historical knowledge and because of perception. I would make an argument against you on the fact that the top heavy to not top heavy. I think there's just as many good SEC schools as there are good Big Ten schools, and there's just as many bad Big Ten schools, because you still have the Purdue's. Minnesota's not that great a school. Like Wisconsin has been horrible this year. Indiana not playing is like middle of the pack. There's a lot of that averageness going on there. Maryland is not good. And SEC, same thing. You have the Arkansas that are not playing well, the Missouris that are not playing well. This year, Kentucky's playing insanely well, which is unheard of for them.
Right.
But Ole Miss is kind of in that middle of the pack because they're there, but they keep on losing now. Texas A&M, same boat. So I would say the conferences are actually quite even, in my opinion. But we don't treat them as even. We treat them as SEC and then everybody else.
Yes.
Or I should say SEC, big gap, the other 4, big gap, everybody else.
Yeah, because the ACC, I mean, not so much this year, but the past couple years, the ACC has gotten a lot of praise because of Clemson.
One team's got praise
because of Clemson. Back in the early 2000s and then like the late 80s and 90s, you had the Miami Hurricanes. But it's always kind of been just like one team that's kind of carried the ACC and gotten them that talk, that talk in the town of, yeah, they're a competitive conference. Not really.
Well, and I feel like every year it winds up being the argument is we should give two to the SEC, we should give one to the Big Ten, and then either the Big 12 or the ACC gets the last one, depending on how good it is. And lately it's been the ACC, and then the Big 12 and the Pac-12, and no one even talks about the Pac-12.
I know.
But it's like half the Pac-12's losses are coming because they're beating the stuffing out of each other. And it's like, well, right. If you're beating each other up, is it really that? This is a conversation that we can continue on, and we should continue on, because you see the same thing in the NFL too, right? Like this year, how do you look at the NFC West compared to the NFC North when you have the NFC West, which is 4 insanely good teams all beating each other up, when you have the NFC North where it's only got one team going at it? It's like, well, is the NFC North team really that much better, or is it just because they don't have the competition at the same level? Which is the argument that people make for the SEC, but the problem is that argument doesn't have as much validity as they're saying it does. When I can tell you that Ohio State this year is going to have to play Penn State, they're going to have to play Michigan State, they're going to have to play Michigan. That's not easy. And then when I look at the Alabama schedule, they beat Ole Miss, they beat a beat up Florida team, they lost to a Texas A&M team. Yes, they will likely play an eventual Georgia team. But their resume is really not as off the chain as you might think. Even Georgia, their best win of the season is Kentucky, a good but not great team. They beat Auburn, a above average team, and they beat Clemson, who at the time was thought to be good, but we've now found out is a below average team this year.
Yeah.
So where are their quality wins? I look at the list of who's beating who, and I look at it and I'm like, maybe I haven't seen all the quality wins yet, but I see potential for quality wins for Ohio State. I see potential wins for Michigan. I see potential wins for Michigan State. I see potential wins for Oklahoma. They've had an undefeated record, and they still have to play Baylor, Iowa State, and Oklahoma State. Big time game. I see potential. And I look at Alabama, Georgia, and what I'm seeing is we're talking about them because they're going to play each other. But what else is on their resume?
Right.
What else is there? Give me another top 10 school that they're playing against. There isn't one. There's no one in this top 10 list other than themselves that they'll play all year long.
Right. But it's Alabama and it's Georgia.
Yep.
And that's why everyone's talking about it, because they're perennial teams that have a reputation and they sell tickets.
They do. And I think this conversation will continue going on. This will not be our last time talking about it. I'm sure it's going to keep on coming up because the playoffs are going to keep coming out each week with new ones. So I encourage everybody, subscribe to the channel because you're not going to want to miss the next conversation. I hope everyone enjoyed this episode. I hope you comment. What are your thoughts? Do you believe in 4? Do you believe in 8? Do you believe in 12? Do you believe in our top 4s? Do you believe in what the playoff comes out as tonight with the top 4s? And if you don't, let us know. Let's have the conversation. Let's discuss it. Let's see where everyone falls in line. Zach, as always, it's a great conversation. I hope everyone goes over to Nelson's Cards and Collectibles and likes subscribes to your channel. I know that you've been opening up some crazy stuff. If you haven't already, people, go check out his TikTok. Saw a couple days ago that he opened up a Panini 1 box that was insane. Yes. I'm not going to spoil it for anybody. You're going to want to go check it out. Also, hop over to Heroes Card Challenge. Check us out. We got all kinds of great stuff coming on. And I look forward to what we come up next week for our next episode, Zach, because these conversations are some of the best ones we ever had.
Absolutely, man. It's always a pleasure.
All right, man. Have a good one. And everyone else out there, always remember, it's game time all the time.